Let's face it, mid-size SUVs are about as interesting as visiting a doctor's appointment. But these two are trying to spice things up with Camaro-inspired styling and being a sporty ST line trim level. But how does the Chevy Blazer and the Ford Edge compare when they're head-to-head? Well, let's get out of this wind and rain and let's go for a drive. Starting things in the Chevy Blazer, you have two engine options. The more lower end trims get a 2-liter turbo, whereas the more higher end trims get the optional 3.6-liter V6. This particular one is the LT trim, but it does have the optional V6. It produces 308 horsepower and 270 pound-feet of torque. That is more power than the turbo 4-cylinder in the Ford Edge, but it's about 10 pound-feet of torque less. However, because it is a naturally aspirated V6 and it's a more old-fashioned type of engine, it is really responsive and it gets the Chevy Blazer up to 100 kilometers an hour in about 6.5 seconds, which is faster than the Ford Edge by about half a second, maybe a little bit over half a second. In the Ford Edge, like I said, you do get a 2-liter turbo engine, and that engine produces 250 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. However, with that engine, it does have a lot of torque down low in the RPMs, but it's not as low as other turbocharged engines. You see, in other turbocharged engines, the peak torque figure is reached below 2,000 RPMs. In the Ford Edge, it's reached at around 3,000 RPMs. So every time you put your foot down, the engine really needs to rev up a bit to get the most out of it. Now, I'm not saying that it feels underpowered at, let's say, 2,000 RPMs when you just gently apply your foot to the throttle pedal, but you do feel a little bit more acceleration as the RPMs build. But between the two, this V6 and the Blazer just feels much more gradual and smoother at delivering the power. With the V6 and the Blazer, it can also tow more, up to 4,500 pounds compared to 3,500 pounds in the Edge. As well, the Blazer comes with a 7-pin connector, whereas the Edge only has a 4-pin connector. With the V6, the 2022 Chevrolet Blazer LT is rated for 12.6 liters per 100 kilometers in a city and 9.2 liters per 100 kilometers on a highway. This engine does not require premium fuel like the Edge. The 2022 Ford Edge ST line is rated for 11.6 liters per 100 kilometers in a city and 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers on a highway. So while the Ford Edge does get better fuel economy numbers, it does require premium fuel, which could offset any fuel economy savings, depending on your driving style, of course. Both of these SUVs come with automatic transmissions. The Ford Edge gets an 8-speed, whereas the Chevy Blazer gets a 9-speed automatic. In everyday driving situations, both of them are pretty smooth to change gears, and both of them are pretty slow if you decide to take over controls. In the Ford, you get paddle shifters on the steering wheel, but in the Blazer, you just have buttons on the side of the gear selector. Now, like I said, both of them are pretty smooth to change gears in just normal everyday driving situations, but there is a difference between these two transmissions. When you want to put your foot down and get a burst of acceleration, the 8-speed in this Ford Edge is a little bit slower to react than the 9-speed in the Chevy Blazer. As well, when you set off from a stop in this Edge, the transmission is quite slow to change gears in the lower gears. So between first and second, second and third, you notice your head doing a lot of this every time there's gear changes. Now I am exaggerating a little bit, but what I mean is that you do notice a difference in the way that this car accelerates. So you can actually feel the car not accelerating in a smooth and gradual pace like how you do in the Chevy Blazer. So between these two cars, it's the 9-speed and the Blazer that's just a little bit better than this 8-speed. As for the rest of the driving dynamics between these two SUVs, it is the Chevy Blazer that is the better of the two. The steering just feels much more communicative and more direct than the one in the Ford Edge. It's also more nicely weighted compared to the one in the Edge. That one is just way too light. As well, the brakes in the Chevy Blazer are also a little bit more firm, so you get more confidence every time you put your foot on the brake pedal. The brakes in the Edge are still good. They will stop the SUV just fine. It's just that you have a little bit more finesse in this Chevy Blazer. Also, if you get the Chevy Blazer in the RS trim, then you're also going to get a twin-clutch all-wheel drive system. This twin-clutch all-wheel drive system allows for real torque vectoring by sending the engine's power to the outside rear wheel midway through a corner. In the Ford Edge, it tries to imitate this effect by using the brakes. However, it doesn't work quite as well as the real thing. For those looking for a more enjoyable driving experience, the Blazer is the clear choice. When it comes to the ride comfort of these two SUVs, there is a bit of a difference between them. It's not a huge difference, but you definitely notice it if you drive them back to back. The Ford Edge is a bit more supple and more forgiving when you drive over bumps. The Chevy Blazer is not bad per se, but you definitely notice the firmer suspension. As for noises inside the cabin, they're both pretty much the same when it comes to road noise from the tires and wind noise. Not much in the way of wind noise and a little bit of road noise on highways. However, the difference is with engine noise. The V6 is more noticeable from around 2000 and above RPMs, whereas this 4-cylinder in the Ford Edge is a little bit quieter. Sitting inside the Ford Edge, there is plenty of space for my 6'4" height. Actually, there's plenty of space in both of these SUVs for my height. However, in the Ford Edge, you do sit quite high up. So even though this seat is as low as possible, I'm still sitting pretty high up. So I have very good visibility out the front, out the side, and even out the back. It's just that if you want to be one of those drivers where you can, sit really low, all, gangster style, this isn't the SUV for you. You can sit much lower in the Chevy Blazer. As for the interior design of these two SUVs, I have to say I do like the 12-inch touchscreen that's in the Ford Edge. It is running on Sync 4 infotainment system and it's pretty easy to use. However, I find that the touchscreen, or actually the infotainment system in the Chevy Blazer, is just a little bit easier and more intuitive to use. However, that 8-inch touchscreen looks tiny compared to the 12-inch touchscreen of the Ford Edge. My only complaint about this touchscreen in the Ford Edge is that the climate controls are integrated into the infotainment system. They're always going to be at the very bottom of the touchscreen regardless of what you do on the actual infotainment system, whichever menu or sub-menu you decide to be in. But it's a bit distracting when you're driving to try and change the temperature. Happily, however, you can change the temperature by voice controls in the Ford Edge. Temperature 21.
Setting temperature to 21 degrees.
Unfortunately, in the Chevy Blazer, you can't do that. But the actual climate controls are physical buttons and physical knobs, so it's really, really easy to use in the Chevy Blazer. And in the Chevy Blazer, I also do like the dual analog gauges. In the Ford Edge, it's just one analog speedometer with 2 digital screens on either side. I don't really like it that much, but that's just personal preference. So with that, let's go check out the back seats in the Chevy Blazer now. In the back of the Chevy Blazer, you don't get quite as much legroom as you get in the Ford Edge. With this seat in my driving position, my knees are touching up against the back of the front seat. However, they don't feel squished or anything like that. But in the Ford Edge, I have maybe a finger's width of space in between my knee and the back of the front seat, again, in my own driving position. Headroom is a little bit less in the Ford Edge, but the Ford Edge does have the panoramic sunroof. This particular demo vehicle of the Chevy Blazer does not have it, so I do have a little bit more headroom. But one thing that the Ford Edge doesn't have and the Chevy Blazer does have is sliding second row seats. So if somebody shorter is sitting here, you can trade up some cargo space, or vice versa. Of course, in both of these SUVs, the back seats can also recline, and there are plenty of USB ports in the back of both of them, and they both have pretty much completely flat floors in the second row. So anybody that's sitting in the middle, you don't have to sit with your legs wide open. In the trunk, it's again the Ford Edge that wins the competition. It has 1,110 liters with the rear seats up and 2,078 liters of cargo space with the rear seats folded. The Chevrolet Blazer has 864 liters with the back seats up and 1,818 liters of cargo space with the rear seats folded. But there are a few differences between the two. Even with the spare wheel underneath the floor, the Blazer has enough extra space to store a backpack, for example. The floor also has a little hook to hold it up, which frees both of your hands. A nice little touch that the Edge doesn't have. As well, the rear seats fold completely flat in the Blazer. The rear seats in the Edge have a bit of an incline. Both SUVs have similar starting prices, but the Edge has standard all-wheel drive across all trim levels. The base SE trim of the 2022 Ford Edge can be obtained for just under $38,000 Canadian, while this mid-range ST line trim comes equipped at around $46,800 Canadian. The 2022 Chevrolet Blazer 2-liter front-wheel drive starts at around $37,500 Canadian, with this LT V6 all-wheel drive trim costing just under $44,500 Canadian as equipped. Both of these SUVs have power liftgates, heated seats, wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, parking sensors, automatic climate control, and remote start with keyless entry, to name a few. But they can also be equipped with panoramic sunroofs, ventilated front seats, surround view cameras, although it should be noted that on the Edge, it's only a front camera and not side cameras. There's also adaptive cruise control, leather upholstery, and so on. On the safety side of things, both vehicles come standard with automatic emergency braking, lane departure warning with lane keep, auto high beams, and front pedestrian braking. The Edge also has blind spot sensors as standard, which are optional on the Blazer. The only major difference between these two SUVs when it comes to safety is that the Blazer's available enhanced automatic emergency braking system can work up to 160 kilometers an hour, and the blind spot sensors work when the SUV is stationary. The other difference is that the Ford Edge received a top safety pick from the IIHS, whereas the Chevrolet Blazer did not. Both SUVs performed well in crash tests, but it was the headlights that made the difference. The Blazer received marginal and poor marks, depending on trim levels, while the Edge received acceptable and poor ratings for the headlights, again, depending on trim levels. So which one of these two SUVs is best? Well, that really depends on what you need from a mid-size SUV. If you find yourself driving a lot on highways or taking trips with your family, then the Ford Edge is better. It's more comfortable and it has more interior space than the Blazer. But if you want a more engaging driving experience and you want to tow a lot of stuff, then the Blazer is best. So like I said, it really depends on what you need from a mid-size SUV that should dictate whether you look at the Ford Edge or the Chevy Blazer. And if you want to know more about either of these two SUVs, I wrote a comparison detailed review of them over on my website. You can find that link in the video description or click on the pop-up banner up there. And as always, I will see you in the next car or truck or most likely another pair of SUVs. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video where it's hopefully drier than it is in this one. Take care.